katika njia inayoichagua, nafsi yake itakaa hali ya kufanikiwa.
When I first went out to KCMC, it was back in the year 2001. At the time I didn't know what to expect. I had lived in Africa before. I've lived in Nigeria for 5 years, so I knew the difference between the cultures, but I wasn't sure how a working relationship would develop.
I went out to KCMC, Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Centre in Moshi, to see whether what I do, which is keyhole surgery or laparoscopic surgery, would have any relevance at all for a hospital like KCMC. Bearing in mind that Moshi, Tanzania are one of the 10 poorest countries on the planet, I was really sceptical as to whether it would be of any use to them at all.
The surgical wards were so packed out with people. There were people in corridors, there were people between the beds, everything but 2 people inside the beds together. And the only way that the numbers could be improved, brought down, if they could do the surgery quicker.
The hospital actually wasn't as bad as I envisioned, saw it in my mind. But obviously they still have very basic equipment, lack of equipment. Sometimes, they don't have simple things like sutures and dressings that we take for granted over here. So you're kind of always cobbling bits and pieces together.
I was absolutely charmed by the people, and I found that the hospital directors were so keen to establish links and to work in a true partnership where we could actually support their ideas and how they wanted the hospital to develop.
What I'd like to do is to give you an overview of how we've arrived at where we are today. Hey, Yahweh, Mama. Hey, Yahweh, Mama. Within a few days, it became evident that the advantages that we get over here are absolutely magnified over there. Advantages, particularly about less pain, less infection, are really important. Within a few days, I'd worked out that actually, if we could introduce a laparoscopic or keyhole approach to surgery, that it would actually help the people over there. And the other important thing, of course, was that the surgeons over there were also very interested. They'd actually got a laparoscopic stack. It's a video camera in there. Okay? They had the monitor and the insufflation and the light source and the camera. So they actually had that. It had been donated by an American at some stage. It had actually stayed in the corner of a storeroom and had never been touched for 5 years, but that's another story. So when we got there, we had a look at this stack, we took it apart, we put it back together again, we took it apart again, and we got them to put it back together again, meaning the surgeons over there. We checked the bulbs and all the rest of it, and then we had to go and look for some carbon dioxide gas, because when we do laparoscopic surgery, we actually insufflate or blow up your abdomen with gas so that we can have space inside and we can see what we're doing. In this country, in the Western world, for example, we'd use medical grade carbon dioxide, which is 99.8% pure. But of course in Tanzania there's no such thing. So they ended up getting some carbon dioxide from a place down the road from the hospital. They produced this big canister with carbon dioxide across the top of it, CO2, blah, blah, blah. And down the bottom they had Coca-Cola, because of course the local factory is a Coca-Cola factory. They use carbon dioxide in their drinks, and that's what we used. And it's actually, I found out subsequently, 99.6% pure. So it's not actually that far off medical grade, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper.
Pop the gallbladder in there, close it up.
We first of all ran a training course for the surgeons and the nurses, because of course this is a team job. It's not just one man and his dog kind of thing. It's a team job. Everybody in the theatre needs to know what's happening during laparoscopic surgery. That's very important. And we brought over a simulator, box simulators, and again we trained the surgeons how to use the laparoscopic instruments and the nurses, how to take them apart, how to clean them, how to reassemble them. Having done that, we then did a run through in the operating theatre. So we connected up the stack, we connected up the light source, we had the carbon dioxide, we had the table, and we had an anaesthetic machine there for the anaesthetist. We did a run through in the theatre, and just as we were preparing for the operation, the electricity went off. Electricity in Tanzania at the time was provided by a massive hydroelectric dam somewhere. And one of the generators in that dam had broken down for the want of a fuse or something. It was something along those lines, basically. So they had to cut back on how much electricity they were using. And of course, in this country, again, if the electricity, if the main power goes off, we have a backup generator, which kicks in, you know, within a microsecond or whatever, and nobody notices. It's great. Over there, electricity goes off, you're in the dark. So you can imagine in the middle of an operation, the light source goes, the camera goes, everything goes, you're in the dark, bad news. So I rang the Tanzanian National Grid, and I got this really nice woman on the end of the phone. I explained what we were doing. I said, look, we want 2 hours of uninterrupted electricity supply to Moshi, that's in northern Tanzania, please. True to her word, we had the electricity promptly, you know, for those 2 hours. It was continuous and all the rest of it. The clock ticked past 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it was, and the electricity went off. But during that time, having done all the rehearsal, all the training, recruited patients, we carried out the first laparoscopic cholecystectomy in Tanzania. And the patient did really well. And I saw her on the ward the next day. I was there with the nurse and I said, has she been out of the bed? And the nurse went, oh, no, hasn't been out of the bed. And I promptly pulled the sheets back and stood the patient up. And the nurse was absolutely offended by this. And I handed her a glass of water and I said, have a drink of that. The patient drank it. I said, how do you feel? She said, fine. I said, do you want to go home? At which point the nurse almost collapsed. Because they had been so used to having a patient have an operation, through an open operation, having to be on the ward for a week, 10 days, even longer if they got an infection. And this whole idea that they could actually get up and stand up and have a drink and go home, like within 12 hours of the operation, was just completely foreign to them.
I had my surgery yesterday around 12:30 to 14 hours. Now it's about 24 hours left. So I'm fine and the pain is reduced. I don't have severe pain, it's just mild pain. And I have managed to go to the conference, the hospital conference today, as a case presentation. And really, I thank for all doctors and nurses, because this procedure, it seems, is very simple and it doesn't consume a lot of time when staying in hospital. So I will be just staying in a short period, because now I've been discharged in the around 14 they discharged me.
So there's the common bile. Can you all see that, yeah? You can see the common bile. At the end of that first trip, we carried out maybe 3 or 4 lap choles. Over the next year or so, we did more each time we went, and the surgeons there became more confident, the nurses became more confident. But we found that they were operating mainly when we went over. We can only go over for maybe a couple of weeks a year, and therefore, you know, what happens for the rest of the time? So we were thinking about what we might do to help this. And we were walking out of the corridor, and we both had the same idea at the same time, which was to connect to KCMC in Moshi, Kilimanjaro, over the internet, or over some form of link, to provide an audio-visual link to the operating theatres, to beam back the image that the surgeons there are seeing through their laparoscope or their telescope, and then be able to give them advice over the internet. So rather than standing beside them, we were a bit further away by about 7,000 miles, but we would be there to give them advice. Really, it was from that point on that we started looking at how we might do that, and we looked at, for example, satellite links and ISDN lines and all this sort of stuff. Most of it was prohibitively expensive, basically, and we couldn't do that.
So we were left with, well, it has to work, it's got to be reliable, it's got to be fast enough for video, and it's got to be dirt cheap, which is the holy grail as far as data network managers and designers are concerned. So we then had to kind of try and think laterally a little bit. How can we actually get, the big thing is always bandwidth. Where can you get bandwidth? And so we started having a chat with the Tanzanian telecommunication company, and they were prepared to guarantee bandwidth. Now, just to give you an example, if you want guaranteed bandwidth here, in the UK or from any of the internet providers, you won't get it without paying, again, thousands of pounds, because they tend to oversell it. So the bandwidth, even in this country, is very unreliable.
This is our high-tech ADSL connection, recently installed. This is the second one. so this is our twin ADSL line.
The clock was ticking this first time because the BBC were going to do a scheduled slot for them to film the first live transmission from an operating theatre in KCMC. So the clock was against us, and we were pulling our hair out, trying to get everything working, screaming at the telecommunication company to give us the bandwidth, rushing out to buy new batteries.
Just call him. Hello, are we going to work? Is it going to work? No. My stuff is going to work. Your stuff, no problem.
You just don't know how bad things can be there, and when you see where they threw the ADSL lines in, how it was routed, how it was wired in this building, it's scary, really.
Okay, now let's do this.
We were able to, and it's documented, to do a live transmission, and the relief at that point actually was huge, because even with doing all the sums, all the maths, all the calculations, all the theory, just to actually get those first steps of a video transmission and to hear somebody in the UK, I was out obviously there in Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, that's moving faster. I can see you've turned the camera now.
To actually hear somebody back from the UK, and for them to say, we can see you, and to then confirm that the images they were receiving, because we were sending them live laparoscopic images, and for them to say that these images are good enough for us to telementor from, I thought that was just it was a huge relief and a real milestone.
Hi, Dr. Kondo.
Hello, Liam, nice to see you.
It's good to see you as well.
So every Tuesday morning we've got a group of surgeons who turn up at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is 10 o'clock in the morning in Tanzania, and they sit down, they talk through operations with the guys over there, they give them support and help. And that's really the first step, successful step now.
Yes.
That's part of the programme that we're running.
Yeah.
And we have obviously other ideas as to what we're going to do with this link, which will include teaching and training nurses and theatre staff. But it's it's been a fantastic experience and collaboration, really, isn't it?
I mean, the important thing is to understand, the flakiness is a good word of the telecommunications infrastructure. You've got to remember that 150 years ago, where we are was, where Henry Stanley went to find Livingstone. I mean, we were in the middle of deepest, darkest Africa. There were no roads, no cars, no trucks, no electricity. So in that space of time, it's a huge country, it's a huge amount of area to cover, and so you can well imagine that only a few years ago they wouldn't have had a telephone there. For you to be able to use internet and internet technology, it's quite a phenomenal achievement, and the rapidity of it is quite staggering.
Thanks for giving TTCL an opportunity. We are proud being with you, because we are not one in this. We've been running various programs which have been sustainable, aimed at exchanging expertise to ensure that our people are getting modern services, modern cure of a modernized era, so that at the end of the day we improve the health of our people, so that they can work hard to contribute to the economic development of our country.
The other thing is that KCMC has had its profile raised dramatically because of this.
Yes.
So, for example, it's the only hospital in Tanzania now which has a laparoscopic program, basically, and that the Department of Health in Tanzania is looking at KCMC as being the laparoscopic training centre for the country.
Yeah.
And of course, not just the country, but East Africa.
The whole region,
yeah.
Yes.
I can see the liver being lifted up with retraction on the gallbladder.
To have such a technology allowing us, KCMC, to operate on patients and discuss the procedure with our fellow surgeons in Northumbria. So it's a great achievement, and I think it will give us the morale to continue performing more and more cases.
Well, we're looking to obviously look at expanding links programs. It's a great scheme that we operate, and as I say, this is a first-class example of what can be done. And I do genuinely hope people look at it and say, "Me too. We want to take part in schemes like this." And that's going to be great news not only for people and organisations in the UK, but importantly, people in the developing world who can take advantage of those schemes and helping them fight their way out of poverty through better health interventions.
I mean, we get an awful lot out of it as well. It's not just a one-way, it's not a one-way thing at all. We get a fantastic amount out of it. It's really, really very, very rewarding. And it makes you feel very humble about the whole situation over there, really does. You come back here and you think, my goodness, why do people complain over here about what they have? It's just unbelievable. I feel that the way we've done it has been a good way to do it. I mean, I know of other people, groups who take a different approach, which is the one I mentioned earlier, where they go out and they do stuff. So they go out and they do surgery, do you know what I mean? And then 2 weeks later they leave again, and what's behind? Well, yeah, they've cured 10 people or something, but that's it. Whereas our approach is actually to go out and train them and get them to take it on and go for it. And I think that way is sustainable and makes a difference, basically.
So really, from that first idea, that sort of brainwave, and in a chat really on a hospital corridor, we've ended up with an absolutely fantastic project.
Mama.